the winner of Survivor Africa.
Elevate Me is brought to you by Scotiabank, the Spring Mill Distillery, and Wellington Motors.
Ethan, where are you? I can't see you. There you are. Hey. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for being our first ever guest on Elevate Me.
It is such an honor to be involved with you guys, be the first guest ever. I'm forever indebted to you.
Thank you. That record can never be broken. You got it.
Yeah. I like the first, Like I was the first player to score a goal in the World Cup for Canada, and I'm always like, that was the best goal to score because nobody can ever break that record.
True.
It's funny when we were connecting about this interview and you were talking about being an isolation specialist, I never really thought about that. But it's kind of crazy that timing wise and where we sit right now, like how do you feel about all this?
Well, I feel comfortable right now because of where I am located geographically. I'm here in the United States. I'm living in the middle of the woods of New Hampshire, so I'm away from people in general. And like you said, I've had a little bit of experience in isolation, having gone through some health challenges and survived a reality television show, which is all about kind of isolating yourself in the community. But I think the one interesting thing about this stuff that's going on right now is like we are all going through the same thing at the same time, versus something like a cancer where, that was a personal experience for me and the people directly associated with me. And so it's just a different experience and it's hard to relate to people about a cancer diagnosis. However, something like this virus where everyone's forced and asked to stay at home, I think it just changes it a little bit because we can all share and connect and be with each other during this crisis.
What would you say to people? I mean, I know I work from home, so this is for me as well. It kind of feels like this is my normal routine. I sit at my office for hours and hours and hours on end, and my sister sometimes tells me I have tree stumps growing out of my chair. But for a lot of people, I've been reading a lot of people getting a lot of anxiety. Is that your cat?
That's my cat.
You're going to see mine come up too.
Oh
my goodness.
Lucy. This is my therapy cat. Lucy keeps me staying in isolation, right, Lucy?
Oh, Lucy's beautiful. Hold on. Since we're going to do that.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah.
That's my little baby.
Matching Persians. Adorable.
I can't do the same with my 115-pound Mastiff.
This is going in the wrong direction. Bring it back.
That's okay. I'm going to make one comment. Mike always said he wasn't a cat person until he started working here, and now he is officially a cat person.
Oh,
it happened.
I just have to get some mice, because every animal needs a job for me. So,
So I guess I would say, like, what I know you've got some. That's a talking point for you now. Talking about isolation and the anxiety that comes with it. What kind of experience you have behind this to maybe give people some pointers or some help?
Yeah, and just a little bit of background. The reason I feel I'm a little bit of an expert is I went through a rare form of blood cancer called CD20 positive Hodgkin's lymphoma. And part of the process is I had a stem cell transplant, which didn't work out so well. So I had to do it all over again. And I had a second stem cell transplant. And part of the recovery from a stem cell transplant is the doctors suggest and have you in isolation for 100 days post-transplant. So you not only were you in the hospital for about a month getting your transplant, when you're released from the hospital, you're mandated to stay isolated except for trips to the doctor for about 100 days. And then you're suggested to live a socially isolated life after that. And having lived in New York City for the longest period of time, no subways, no crowds, no eating out in restaurants, wearing a mask and gloves when you leave the house, no interaction with people within 6 feet away. So that's something that I've lived with for a while, and I understand, what that process is like, and especially literally being locked inside a 600 square foot apartment, for those 100 days, you get a little bit stir crazy, I guess you can say.
So, well, and what advice would you give people?
The advice I would give people is basically one thing that I found for me that was very helpful is that if we can focus on helping other people in the middle of our own crisis or our own nightmare, I feel it helps you heal as a human being. And so, when I was diagnosed with cancer and locked in my apartment, I saw that, I kind of live by the saying these days, never let a crisis go to waste, because it's an opportunity to do some really important things. So how can we individually and as a community and as a country do some help for other people during this horrible situation that we find ourselves in? And I think that gives us a little bit of a sense of purpose and meaning to why this may or may not be happening in the world. Obviously, take care of yourself. That's very important. Make sure you are safe on your own thing. But once you're past that, I feel helping other people is something that's a pretty successful way of healing during a time of crisis.
Perfect. So, for those of you who don't know Ethan, I was introduced to Ethan, like so many other people were, third season of Survivor Africa. So, let's go back to the beginning, because I feel like so much of what you're doing now really started with the Survivor Africa. And, forever called, I guess, the politician, right? You won the game by being the nice guy. Like you proved that the nice guy, because up until that time, the Richard Hatches and you had to be scheming and conniving to win the game. And you did it as honorably as anybody, I think, could have ever done it in the 40 seasons. Can we go back to that time, to how that whole thing started?
Sure, I'd love to go back to that time. 40 years ago, can you believe it? I'd like to say that it was early on in the trajectory of the, Survivor concept, meaning I was the third season of Survivor. So there weren't really that many examples of how to play, leading up to my time out there. But yeah, I was, the way I played the game is similar to the way I play my life. I felt, the game of Survivor it's a game of relationships. And at its core, it's, people. We're interacting with each other. And once you take away food and you take away water and you're tired, you're hungry, you're thirsty, your true colors come out. And for me, all that was left was inside was just who I was as a person. Someone I felt I was, caring, character. And so I kind of used that skill set to make relationships with other people to help me get along in the game. And that was kind of my strategy. As for all the soccer fans, I know we're talking to a bunch of athletes out there.
Yeah.
The way I explained my strategy was I was the assistant coach. I'm okay being the guy behind the guy. And what ended up happening, which is really interesting, is the head coach, this guy named Lex, was kind of driving a lot of the some of the decisions, and people looked at him in a negative way because he put himself in that leadership position. Yet I was the guy behind the guy, and all the rest of the tribe would complain to me about Lex. Lex would complain to me about the tribe, and I was able to spit out that information and use it to my advantage to get ahead in the game.
So I have to say, I know you were known as the nice guy and the politician, but that is actually, I have to say, it's who you are. It's so funny because I'm like, what you see is what you get. You exactly what you were on the show. It's who you are in real life. I love that you were so authentic.
Thank you.
And I think that came off, and it is, for people that are watching this, I've met Ethan many times, and you are exactly that person. So I think that's just a testament to see that somebody that's a good person go through it and just be honorable through the challenge. I think you said something really interesting about Survivor. You said it really screws you up mentally, physically, spiritually, and socially.
It does.
How hard was that? Because it must be so intense when you're there.
It really is. And as an athlete going into it, I felt I'd be okay physically, which I was fine physically. So for me, the most difficult part was the mental side of the game. It's the concept of building relationships with people, becoming friends with people, yet in the back of your mind, okay, well, at some point, I'm going to have to vote this person off, and I'm going to have to vote them off in such a way that when they come back to vote for me to win $1 million, they like me enough or respect me enough or value me as a human where they want to give me that prize. So that's the tricky aspect of the game. So mentally for me, there were moral dilemmas that I faced on a daily basis on like game or relationships, personal relationships. And that was tough. And that's what makes the game so exciting, is having those moments where you're put in these positions, these new and unknown set of circumstances where you're forced to grow and react in response to what's going on in front of you. And like those are the moments that I thrive on. And I think that's really interesting, especially in a time like now where we're forced into a new and unknown set of circumstances where we're going to be forced to respond to this. And like, how are we going to react as a human? How are we going to react as a community, as a country, in Canada as a country? So I think that's interesting, and we should all take time to understand a little bit about our own selves and know like what we can bring to the table. How can we make the right alliances, if you will? How can we make the smart partnerships to everyone help each other in this time of crisis?
Well,
is this great?
okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, speaking to that, right, the right alliances, and even speaking to your character as a person who takes negative situations and turns them into positives. You know, one of the scenes in that original season was you guys went into the village, and you had your hacky sack, and you're playing hacky sack, with these kids, with these village kids, and that experience ends up becoming something that you took and turned into something that's pretty spectacular. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. You guys, I love these softball questions you're throwing at me. Yeah, so on Survivor, I won one of those reward challenges where I won these 2 goats, which I wasn't so happy about. But I took these goats to this little village of Wamba. And before I left this village of Wamba, I was hanging out in the parking lot of Wamba Hospital, and all these little Kenyan children came out because we filmed the show in Kenya. And they were touching my skin and playing with my hair, like they'd never really seen any guy like me before. And so I had a hacky sack with me, which was the one like luxury item you were allowed to bring back in the day. And so we just started playing hacky sack and soccer and kicking it around, and we're laughing and we're smiling and we're communicating through the sport that we both love and the language that we both understand, but we're not speaking the same language. And it was like, at that moment I realized, okay, we're onto something. And before I left the hospital, I asked one of the nurses, like, why are all these kids just hanging out in the parking lot of the hospital? And she looked at me, she says, well, these are the kids that are HIV positive. So I was like, wow, like to have a real life experience in the middle of this cutthroat game of Survivor, a game that I'm playing for $1 million, just didn't really connect with me. So when I got back from the show, I had a chunk of money in my pocket. I had a little bit of fame, which is definitely up. And I met up with some of my soccer buddies, and we created this organization called Grassroots Soccer, which Helen has been involved with for the longest time as a supporter and a fan and all our events. So yeah, and basically what Grassroots Soccer is we are an adolescent health organization that's using the power of soccer to help educate, inspire, and mobilize young people to make healthier choices in life and become agents of change in the community.
Well, and you've had a lot of success, eh?
Yeah. We, from that moment in Survivor Africa, we're in 60 countries now. We've graduated 2.6 million kids from the program. So it's something that, as an organization, we're incredibly proud of.
So take us through to your decision to go back on this past year. I love that. I read that you actually visualized yourself being on another season when you were sick. Mm-hmm. Is that true?
A little bit. I was visualizing myself healthy enough to be able to go play on another season. Like when I was watching, so every now and then they do these reunion seasons or all-stars. They bring people back. The season that's happening right now, it's Survivor Season 40, if you can believe it. It's called Winners at War, where they brought back 20 of the most popular winners of all time to compete again for not $1 million, but $2 million, which is really exciting. So, it was around the year 2010. They had one of those all-star seasons called Heroes versus Villains, and I was literally in the hospital getting my second stem cell transplant, watching this on TV, just thinking to myself, like praying and dreaming that, one, I would be alive when I get out of this, but then get myself to a state of mental, physical, spiritual health and fitness where I could go out there and play a game like Survivor again. And
how did you, you were throwing a couple blows with cancer. How did you deal with that? That's tough.
Yeah, I think dealing with cancer as a young adult adds a whole another layer of challenges. I was 35 years old on top of the world. And, it just punches you in the stomach. And like, when all my other friends were just starting their life, I had to press pause on mine. And so that was a difficult situation. But on the flip side, when a doctor tells you to do something or you'll die, you pretty much do it. Like, there's really not much choice you have there, right? So for me, it was the after effects of Survivor. It was when they said, okay, you're in remission, go home, and your life's supposed to be back to normal like that. And so for me, the dump trucks full of uncertainty, the invisible scars that need healing, the anxiety of relapse, the fear of death, that is what for me has been the most difficult part, is the after effects of Survivor.
Beautiful. And we talk about being mentally, physically, and spiritually ready to come on to this season. What are some of the things that you did to prepare for that?
Well, I had to get off the couch. That was one thing. I had to stop eating Doritos and using cannabis. That was another thing. It gets dark in New Hampshire at like 4:30. Give me a break, everyone.
Same here. We're in the same boat.
So that was a big part of it. I had lived, I had taken a break from being fit. I'm not going to lie. So when I got that call, there's snow up to my waist. The lake was frozen. So I had to make some choices to get fit, get healthier again. So I did a lot of work. I moved out of New Hampshire to a warmer climate. I started, working out. I got a trainer. I changed my diet. I got off coffee and sugar and cannabis. I read psychological books. I read personality books. I spoke with my shrink. I untied knots. I did puzzles. My wife would hide idols in the forest for me to go look for. If I was going to do this and I was going to give it 100% and come out of retirement after 20 years to play this crazy game again, I needed to put in the time. Like, I was training for my first World Cup match, which will never happen for me. But it was that type of situation. Like, this is going to be the game of my life, and let's make it a full-time job to get ready for it.
I heard you said you went into it differently. You wanted to just appreciate the moments. Did you get that? But I also heard it was the hardest season for you as well, right? Like, it was hard, wasn't it?
The season is still going on, so I'm not at liberty to unveil some of the answers to your questions. But I encourage everyone to tune in. It's on Wednesday nights, 8 p.m.
Perfect.
In the United States. What was the question again?
I was saying, you said it was a very tough season for you.
Yeah. So I knew, listen, the game of Survivor, 20 people play, there's only one winner, which means there's 19 losers, right? So you just got to put things into perspective out there at anyone going into the game. And so for me, I definitely wanted to go out there and do my best to win, but I also wanted to go out there and try to win at other parts of the game or life, or however you want to describe it. So it was important for me to take advantage of these moments. Especially now, you never know what's going to happen. You never know what's out there. So for me to go out there, I wanted to celebrate the things that matter in life. A sunset, sunrise, stars, lighting a fire, catching a fish, making friends with people if possible. So those things, I can always win at those. I'll take those with me forever. No one's ever going to be able to steal those from me. And so that was important for me to accomplish some life goals and accomplish some game goals as well.
Perfect. And I wanted to go back to something you had said. I heard you say in an interview where you said, and we touched on this briefly, but I really wanted to deep dive into this because I really think this is it speaks to you as a person, and it speaks to every time I meet or speak with someone new, I try to take something from what they say to see if I can apply it to myself. But the quote is, focusing on the plight of another human being helps you heal as a human being. Yeah. And can you kind of expand on that?
Definitely. And I touched on that a little bit earlier, but so when I was 14 years old, cancer came into my home and it took my father away from me. And all I wanted to do was curl up into a little ball and not come out of my room and play. But it was my friends from soccer, my friends from school. It was a community around me that reached out, embraced me. They embraced my family. They reinforced my values in a time when I felt completely alone. So at that early age, I felt I got a good understanding of like the power of community, the power of, helping others, I guess you can say, because without those people, I would have been, I don't know what I would have done. I could have easily taken a path towards drugs and whatever you want out of school, all that stuff. I was a young kid. So at that early age, I kind of got a feeling of that. So when I was going through my journey with cancer, I made a choice to take my battle public because I felt the details of my life might be able to help others out there. And so once again, in your middle of this crisis, I used it to try to help others. And that's what I mean. And there's scientific data out there that shows you focusing on other people and the plight of other people helps you heal as a human. It changes you, who you are. And it's something really easy and simple to do for everyone right now. If you're looking for just a little bit of endorphins to make yourself feel a little bit better on a daily basis. So that's kind of where that quote comes from. I'm a big quote guy. And so that's kind of one of the things I live by.
I love it. And I honestly think that that's what we're here for, right? Is to be able to help other people. So in the same way, you look at a river doesn't drink its own water, a flower doesn't pick itself, a tree doesn't eat its own fruit. Everything in nature exists to support other things in nature. And that's what makes the forest, right? So I think sometimes from a humanity standpoint, if we can all, be the individualized elements of a forest, being able to produce for other people, I think that's what helps us come up and what helps us heal, helps us become whole. So I love that. It really resonated with me.
I also, feel there's a little bit of anxiety that folks are having to, all right, we're all isolated. We're in a mad rush to be productive and to do podcasts and throw everyone online and, learn something and deal. But don't forget, this is just happening. It's new for everyone. It's important that people take time to get your mind around what's going on and understand that this might be a situation we're living in for an extended period of time. And even when it's over, it's going to be different for everyone. The world is going to be different. So I think it's important for people to take time for themselves to mourn maybe what's going on or how it's going to change your life versus jumping into things that might not make sense or you feel forced to because everyone around you is doing it at a rapid, ultra fast pace. So I think that's important to understand and to realize, and don't necessarily feel the anxiety and the pressure to do stuff that you don't want to do just because everyone around you is doing it. It's just a little bit chaotic right now. Uncertainty is what causes anxiety. And we are all in a really uncertain time in our own lives, in the world's life as well. And so one way to calm down that anxiety is to just get a little bit more of a tangible understanding what's going on. We get into these, I like to call them what if scenarios. I was living in a world of what if scenarios when I was sick. What if the cancer comes back? What if I die? What if I never get married? What if I never have kids? What if I don't get a job? All this stuff is going through my head when I was getting through cancer. And what ended up happening is I just got in this hamster wheel of destructive thoughts and decisions in this loop that I just couldn't get out of. And I wasn't living my life because I was just focusing on these what if scenarios. So my wife and I created a plan for how to deal with them. A cat was one of them. That was one of the things as part of the anxiety plan. But basically what happened was we would take a scenario. Let's say, okay, let's play a game here. What if I get the virus? All right, so let's play that scenario. I got a piece of paper. What if I get the virus? I wrote down every single thing I would do if I got the virus. I would take a test. I would call my mom. I would maybe go to the hospital. I would self-isolate. I would do all these things, and then I would file it away. And now all of a sudden, if that destructive what-if scenario comes back in my head, I say, oh, I know exactly what I'm going to do. I made a plan for it. I filed away in this box. Let me go look at it right now. Oh, okay. You put it away and you move on with your day and you don't get focused on it and obsess about it like I did. And I have shoeboxes full of Post-it notes with what if scenarios and plans all going on. But it was a really successful strategy for me to get out of these crazy thought processes that was going on in my mind. And it calmed my anxiety a little bit.
Yeah, the mind is a really interesting thing. If it's something that I study, I read about constantly. If there's anything that I think I do during these times of uncertainty, is I keep my mind positive. I listen to really positive audio, inspiring audio, and hearing you talk about, I know I read about you and cancer, and yet your biggest anxiety came from like worrying about, is it going to come back? Is this going to come back again? So I want to we talked a little bit about it before we started the show, but how did you find cannabis? Like, where did that play into everything, and how did that impact you? Because there's a lot more awareness of it. It's a lot more regulated. And I think it's great, especially when you talk about, I want to hear from you about what you think about how it's helped you and how you found it.
Sure. Well, I definitely found it earlier in my life when I was in college. But I didn't find it a lot. I was definitely I was an athlete, so I never got into drugs or alcohol or recreationally do that stuff. I did it one time, second semester of my senior year. And then I'm like, okay, I did it, fine, I put it away. However, I'm very well aware of cannabis and the association with cancer. So when I was sick, I researched it, to be honest, and found that it might be a good complement to some of the other stuff I was using that was a little bit more synthetic. I was using a lot of, anti-anxiety, anti-pain, anti-nausea, and then in the mornings I'd have to take an Adderall to get out of bed. So I was just living this synthetic lifestyle, pumping myself full of chemicals. I didn't like that, So cannabis, I felt, all right, well, it's grown from the earth. And so I would never smoke it. I would always eat it or put a tincture under my tongue because I'm not a fan of smoking anything, especially when you're sick with cancer. So the issue back then was I couldn't get it, I had to go to the streets of New York City in a mask and gloves down a dark alley and talk to a drug dealer. And he was selling every other drug too. So that just made me a little uncomfortable with the pesticides and mold or the way it was processed. So it became important for me to find a reliable source for cannabis. And for me, it just helped mitigate the side effects of cancer treatments. It's not curative at all for me. And so I started using it here and there. And then now with the after effects of cancer, that's when it's really come into play with the anxiety that I was dealing with, like debilitating anxiety. So I use CBD every day, like a multivitamin. And if something gets a little bit more out of control or out of hand, I will step it up a little bit and I'll do a 1-to-1 ratio of CBD and THC. And that seems to calm me down a little bit and help me sleep and get rid of the anxiety.
Good. And now when it comes to cannabis, did I hear, do you own a cannabis farm? You're partnered with a cannabis farm?
Yes. So part of all of this is, I invested in a 116-acre hemp farm in Plainfield, Vermont called Mont Kush. The guys who own it were two guys I actually met on reality TV. I met them on a show called Eco Challenge back in the day. It was like an event, 10-day adventure race through the jungles of Fiji. And so I met these guys in the middle of Fiji. One of the guys is this guy named Anthony Sullivan. If you guys are a fan of OxyClean, the cleaning solution, he's OxyClean. Hi, I'm Anthony Sullivan. This is OxyClean. Yeah, I don't do a good Sully impersonation. But anyway, his daughter's got some genetic disorders and was going through a lot of health challenges and seizures. So he got her on CBD and it really helped. So he bought a farm because he wanted to grow the actual product he's going to put in his young daughter's body. And I was like, if you're going to do that, I want in. I want to know what I'm putting in my body. So after I got home from Survivor this past summer, moved up to the farm. I planted, I watched it grow, I harvested, I processed. I wanted to be along every step of the way so I could guarantee and understand what is going on with the plant and what it does when you process it and put it inside your body. And so, that's kind of why I got involved, and pretty cool.
Beautiful. And are you noticing a difference between your? I mean, I'm a big farmer. You're living my dream, basically. By the way,
come visit. Listen, we need people to come visit and harvest with us. We need like 200 people during harvest season. It's the most fun I've ever had.
Don't even say that because we'll be there.
Come, bring your cameras. Actually, we filmed the whole thing for a reality show called Kings of Kush, which will be coming out this end of the summer. The same guy that did Ice Road Truckers, Monster Garage, Deadliest Catch. If you're familiar with those shows, he did this one.
Oh, great. Where's it airing? Where are you airing?
I can't. I'm not allowed to say where it's going to be airing yet. So
okay. Well, we'll have to keep our eyes and ears open. So, I mean, it's pretty crazy. Like I look at life and I always think it's so interesting how one thing takes you to the next, that takes you to the next. And I look at you starting on Survivor how many years ago, but that word survivor, would you have thought it would apply so much to your life?
No, never in a million years did I think Survivor, be part of my life. I mean, there are a lot of definitions of the word survivor, but yeah, it's definitely a name that makes sense for me these days. Although I'm trying to, I feel the word survivor is interesting in the sense that when you're surviving something, you are like, you're just trying to get by. You're just trying to, kind of claw yourself out from the bottom. However, so a cancer survivor is a good word, but a cancer thriver can also be a good word where I feel that I've gotten through that, I've survived it, and I'm now thriving in life. And so I think it can be maybe renamed, or I'll work my way towards renaming the survivor thing. Although I am wearing it right now, old school style. So, I'll change that right now.
But I just have a quick question. Somebody asked this on chat. You weren't allowed to take CBD onto this episode. How did that affect you? That would have been a real challenge, eh?
Yeah. I was nervous because I actually asked the doctors if I could take it out there, and they checked, which is wonderful. But it's not legal in Fiji where we filmed, so they didn't let me take it. So I was nervous because, I've lived a comfortable life after Survivor and after cancer, and I got my toolkit here. I got my kid and my cats. I got my wife. I got a house, all this stuff, comforts. So I didn't know what would happen if I go out there without any of that, and then you plop down all the stress of Survivor on top of that, and I don't have what I'm used to and comfortable with in my toolkit and my CBD, that's a lot. That's a lot for someone like myself who's a naturally anxiety-full of guy, and so I was incredibly nervous. It was difficult. It was definitely difficult because out there the days are long and the nights are longer. It gets dark at, 5, and then you got all night. And you're starving and you're hungry and you're not sleeping and people are conniving and just getting in your own head, and it was scary for me.
Big time. So, during all of this kind of isolation, you touched on it briefly where you talked about, feeling the need to do new things. I should learn new things. And obviously we're doing a lot of that and taking on a lot of that. And one of the things that my wife has been trying to get me to do is to go running. And I am not a long distance runner. I'd rather sprint up a hill. But, long distance. And then doing research for this talk, you ran 550 miles? Is that correct?
Well, I dribbled a soccer ball 550 miles from Boston, Massachusetts to Washington, D.C.
With a torn ACL?
At the end, I tore it. So the last, when I was in D.C., so the last 4 or 5 days, I finished with an torn ACL. Yeah.
Wow. And that was for the charity?
Not playing a pickup game at 11 o'clock at night when you're almost about to finish a 550-mile journey.
I'll take that into consideration. I'll remember that for sure. For sure.
Yeah, so that was a campaign that we did for Grassroots Soccer, the charity I was talking about earlier, to raise awareness and raise funds for the work that we were doing. But as a runner, man, my advice to you is this guy, his last name's Galloway. The Galloway method is a run-walk system, and it's really easy. It's really awesome. You run 4 minutes, you walk a minute. You run 4 minutes, and you can put in your age, your weight, how fast you want to go, and it's a really interesting system. It'll help you build up your time on your feet jogging in a really smooth, easy way.
Right. Good. I'll definitely check that out.
The Jeff Galloway method. Check that out.
Yeah, I probably won't, but thank you. I'll just sprint up some more hills.
Perfect.
No, but that's good. That's good. All right.
What do you think?
Go ahead, Helen.
And what do you think if you look back on kind of, everything you've been through, one, I guess, what would your message be to people? And two, what's your biggest lesson? What have you learned? What is something that you would share?
I've covered it a little bit, but my message to everyone is, be kind, be kind to yourself, be kind to others. Especially right now, everyone's saying it, but we are all in this together. And, I think that just embedding yourself in the community, connecting with the people around you is really important in a time like this. I go service over self, really is kind of sometimes how I've mentioned that. I'm going to give you a quote just because I'm that guy. The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort, but where he stands in moments of challenge and controversy. Martin Luther King. So if we can put all ourselves in that moment and really take these challenges on firsthand, I think it will make a big impact.
Well, that's great. That's great. So it's, I'm so glad I got a chance to physically talk to you. I feel like I've gotten the chance to know you. I respect your gameplay. So that's from 20 years ago until now. I think you never got one vote, right? In that season, Africa, not one vote. And that's so difficult to do. Right. So I respect that, and being able to play the game within your rules and not have to compromise, who you are as a person. And so it was definitely an honor for me to sit down and talk to you, and also talk to someone who you said something. You had said that being on Survivor this time was a third in a lifetime opportunity. I think that was the quote. And, sometimes we take life for granted. Right. And when you speak to people who have gone through real challenges, everyone's biggest challenge is their biggest challenge. But a quote that I like to use is always, people have done more with less. And when I'm going through hard times, I say, look, other people are doing way more than I'm doing, and are being hit way harder than I'm being hit right now. And so being able to hear from your own words, all of the great things you've been able to do and start. Another one of my quotes is, what if when you died, who you became got to meet who you could have become? And it's like, wow, you took just an idea from one moment in a parking lot and have affected millions of lives because of it. And all of us have the ability to do that. Right. And being able to share your story with our audience, share your story with everyone is kind of helping me show other people through example that they can do the same thing. Yeah. So we definitely thank you for that. We thank you for coming on.
You are doing you're amplifying other people's stories to help us do what we want to do in a bigger way. And I also think I just want to note that I've been, like you said, a third in a lifetime opportunity, and I am incredibly lucky and fortunate to have been on Survivor and had that platform. And I feel it's also important to note that it doesn't have to be something big and huge. You don't have to start a charity or run 500 miles. Call a friend, send balloons to the hospital, make some face masks, read to some kids. It doesn't have to be something huge and monstrous, in this world. So that's just every little bit helps.
Yeah, every little bit helps. Yeah, I think the whole purpose behind this, having chats, is exactly this: is to get a little bit of inspiration. We keep saying we want to elevate vibration a little bit, and having you on as our first guest was kind of a perfect start to this journey. We'll probably have you on again, Ethan.
Great. Let me know.
We'll deeper into this.
Also, if anyone wants to get any of the stuff that we're making up on the farm, visit montcush.com and use the code SURVIVOR50 and you get 50% off.
Is that a hint? Is that a hint to the next
season? You guys are you guys are looking a little anxious right now.
Awesome. Well, it's been awesome. Thanks, Ethan. I love the fact that it wasn't even when I reached out to you, it wasn't even like, well, let me look at my schedule. It was like, yeah, I'm in. Tell me what you want when you want me. And that's just, again, a testament to who you are as a person. You're just very amenable to these things, and I love your messages. I can see all of them, all of the notes coming up on our Facebook Live. So people are excited to hear from you.
Oh, cool.
But awesome. Thanks so much for being our first guest.
Yay, all right. You can never take that away from me, just like your goal, right?
Right. That's right. A first is the most important, I think. A first is the most
First to
important.
market. I love it.
Awesome. Well, goodbye from all of us here, guys. We're going to end the stream here and look forward to our next one on Sunday.